A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center, experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, she boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor." Wearing a complete church ensemble, I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, "always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent." It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You're one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has your back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. "That's what bullies do when they are afraid." Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. "You mentioned it earlier, on the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception." He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. "You're crazy," he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. "Finish speaking now?" he demanded. "All that talking, and now you're afraid?" Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. "Kyle," she stated, "this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect." Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. "You have just committed a significant error." Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. "You'll find out soon enough." Two rose back. The young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, "She's important. I believe she's someone." Another voice followed. "Is that the chief's wife?" "That's the police chief's wife." And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. "What?" he said. No one answered, but the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, "Call me when you can." Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was one stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now. But for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. "Man, you're tripping," he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. "You think you're better than me," he hissed suddenly. "That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good." Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. "I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret." "You threatening me?" He shot back. "No," she said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. "You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt," he spat. "Nobody gonna save you." And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. "Try that again, and I'll break your arm," the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. "Finished?" he inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. "I won't file charges for what you just did," she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded." The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. "Who?" Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced 1 step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. "That name, her." Oh no," he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." "I didn't know." Kyle shouted. "Yo, I didn't know who she was." Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm okay." Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. "I know you are," he replied, "but I'm not." He hesitated. I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court? Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. Is this your wife? Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. You should have observed the child in the 3rd row, she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. I long for that boy, she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. It's because you didn't react, she said. That alters everything. A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. I didn't even hit her that hard. He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. Do you mind if I handle this? She gave an affirmative nod. I trust you. Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, like, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what? Darius interrupted. Tell me. Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target. Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. She was speaking her mind. No, Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt. Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. That was intentional, Darius stated. You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability. Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. What's going to happen to me? He asked. That depends, Darius said. Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. And later? That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding. He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hands were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. They're taking him to county, he stated. He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it. Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. I won't push, she stated following a brief silence. Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now, Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, The shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences: comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. "Remember that speech I gave last week?" He began. "About dignity, public space, and consequence?" She replied, "Yes, I was in the front row." He continued, "I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury." She nodded. He went on, "When I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you," she acknowledged. "I know," she said gently, "and I regret that I hadn't." Vanessa turned to him. "Please don't do that." He lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have been in that situation." She offered a brief laugh. "Do you believe I haven't faced worse?" His eyes rose. "I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded." He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. "You've always been stronger than I remarked. "No," she replied. "I'm simply more experienced." A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. "Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland?" she inquired. Vanessa turned. "Yes. I just wanted to express my gratitude," she said, "for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity." Vanessa rose, offered her hand. "What's your name?" Rosa replied, "I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's." "You had a long shift?" Vanessa nodded. "You take care of people all day?" "Thank you." Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. "Let's go home." But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. "I'll ride the train tomorrow," she stated. "Are you certain?" "Yes." And the following day, and the day after that. "I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me," Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report, "Community Leader Assaulted on Light Rail. Suspect Apprehended at Station." Another opted for a more dramatic headline: "Slap on the Train Sparks Debate Over Civility and Race." However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. "This is Arte Lance." It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure, others questioned why no one intervened earlier, and predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. "You should put that away," Vanessa said. Daria looked up. "I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said, what you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet." Daria replied. I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol. Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point. Daria sighed. I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet. I have quiet, she replied. And I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt. He looked at her, pausing. That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you. She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. You recall what you told the academy class last spring? She inquired. Which part? He responded. We don't train for revenge. We train for response. Darius chuckled softly. I borrowed that line from my grandfather. Well, you gave it meaning, she replied. It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require. A pause. Did you see how many people were watching? She continued. If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation. Darius nodded slowly. You are correct. At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, My son saw the video and said, That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are. Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. You matter, he said. So do you, she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated, he remarked. I believe every day is, Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. Are you going out? He asked. Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly. Darius also rose. Desire a lift? She offered a smile. No, I will travel by train. She observed her intently for a moment. Are you certain? I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity. However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter. I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, He chose to recount the story of the train. "I wasn't present at the beginning," he stated from the podium. "I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife." He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap. Observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, as they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home, and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful." She remained composed. "What's impactful," she stated, "is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it." He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. "That is all," she responded. "Have a good evening." She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity in action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train. For years, she evaded consequences for her inappropriate behavior until she struck a formally attired black man in court, unaware that he was the judge. The immediate aftermath shattered everything she had established. It unfolded rapidly, unexpectedly. Neither the bailiff, the court reporter, nor even the defendant seated anxiously in the front row anticipated it. Officer Tiffany Rourke had just entered courtroom 2B within the Franklin County Courthouse in Missouri. Her uniform was impeccable, her jaw set, as was her habit. She had established a reputation over the last 10 years, known for being authoritative, direct, and someone to avoid provoking. That morning, she was scheduled to testify in a minor drug possession case. However, she did not reach the witness stand. She noticed a sharply dressed black man standing close to the witness box, speaking softly with one of the attorneys. Without hesitation, she swiftly crossed the courtroom floor and slapped him across the face. The impact resonated through the room. A gasp followed, shared and instantaneous. You could hear the sound of papers falling, a pen rolling onto the floor. For a moment, everything seemed to still. Everyone remained motionless. The man showed no reaction. He didn't flinch, yell, lunge, or raise a hand. He calmly adjusted his tie, brushed his cheek with the back of his hand, and looked her directly in the eye. "I'm Judge Antoine Kelly," he stated, his voice even and deliberate. "And I'm presiding over this courtroom today." That silence? It wasn't just shock anymore. It was palpable, a heavy presence. Every pair of eyes focused on Tiffany, who now appeared as if she'd swallowed a bucket of nails. She blinked once, twice, her mouth barely moving as if struggling to speak. The bailiff, hesitant about the situation, moved restlessly near the door. The young public defender close by immediately reached for her phone, documenting the scene discreetly. Others followed suit. Within seconds, at least 4 phones were recording the event. Tiffany attempted to speak. "I thought he wasn't supposed to be," but the moment had passed. Judge Kelly addressed the silent courtroom and announced, "We're taking a 10-minute recess." Then, he entered his chambers, silent, his expression unreadable. The room remained still. No one knew whether to stand, sit, or depart. Tiffany remained motionless. Her hand, the one she'd used, trembled subtly at her side. The prosecutor approached her and whispered, "You just assaulted a judge." Tiffany gazed at him, visibly pale and blinking quickly, as if the foundation had been removed from beneath her. The news spread rapidly. News reporters, awaiting a separate gang indictment case, quickly entered the hallway. Interns, having left the room visibly shaken, alerted 2 local news outlets. By noon, the video appeared on social media. It was unedited, uncontextualized footage depicting a white police officer in uniform striking a black judge in the courtroom. The accompanying caption on many reposts read, "Cop slaps a judge, unaware he is a judge." Initially, several commenters questioned its authenticity, suggesting it might be staged. The video lacked polish. It mirrored the unpredictable nature of everyday existence. There was no background music, no dramatic camera work, only palpable tension and genuine emotions. Subsequently, responses emerged from lawyers, activists, and former defendants, each possessing unique perspectives. Some immediately identified Tiffany, while others knew her through her reputation. Judge Kelly, however, remained silent. He released no public statement, avoided television appearances, and refrained from pursuing legal action. He remained seated behind his desk, reviewing the day's schedule as if nothing had occurred. However, everyone else recognized a significant change, the kind of change that leaves a lasting impact. Yet, before anyone could fully understand the implications, questions began to surface. What was the truth about Officer Tiffany Rourke? Prior to the incident, most individuals outside of Franklin County were unfamiliar with the name Tiffany Rourke. Within the force, however, she wasn't merely recognized, she was feared. Tiffany's ascent was rapid. Some believe it was too rapid. After graduating from the academy in her early 20s, she progressed to patrol, then narcotics, and subsequently to a specialized task force concentrating on high-risk neighborhoods. She received medals, appeared in department newsletters, and presented at 2 police conferences. However, beyond the publicized events and formal greetings, there existed another facet of Tiffany, the one largely unknown to the public. The initial signs were subtle. A young black driver, ticketed for a broken taillight, asserted he had not violated any laws. When he attempted to explain his situation, Tiffany increased the fine, citing noncompliance. He subsequently submitted a formal complaint, which was not addressed. A Latina mother reported that Tiffany conducted a vehicle search without justification outside a grocery store. When her 10-year-old daughter inquired about the reason, Tiffany responded, "You people should know better." The mother became distressed and filed a report, which was closed within a week. Subsequently, an event occurred that nearly reached the media. A video surfaced showing Tiffany verbally abusing 2 black teenagers seated outside a convenience store. She accused them of loitering. One of the teenagers recorded her outburst. However, the clip disappeared after the boys were arrested for resisting. There were also rumors circulating within the department's locker rooms and among court clerks. Tiffany reportedly used derogatory language when she believed she wasn't being observed. She allegedly threatened junior officers who did not support her in their official reports. Whenever her name surfaced in a formal grievance, the Internal Affairs Division discreetly marked the file as not sustained. She benefited from influential connections, including Chief Brannon, who described her as a capable officer navigating difficult circumstances. He believed the public lacked comprehension regarding the demands of policing in those communities. Fellow officers, such as Officer Sam Delaney, recognized the pattern early on. He once attempted to voice his concerns after witnessing Tiffany forcefully push a suspect's head against a cruiser window. She informed me that if I submitted any documents, my locker would be emptied by Monday. Consequently, he withdrew. They all did, not because they shared her perspective, but because Tiffany embodied the established order. She wasn't a deviation from it, nor an unusual case. She was the system. She represented the convergence of power and prejudice disguised by authority. And it wasn't simply her behavior. It was the confidence stemming from her perceived immunity. Around 6 months prior to the courtroom incident, a newly appointed officer, Jordan McLean, submitted a formal complaint following 2 weeks of riding alongside her. During that time, she halted 6 vehicles in a single day. All the drivers were black, and they were all within the same 3-block area. He documented in the internal log that none of the stops were warranted. McLean was then reassigned to desk duty 2 weeks later. Tiffany received a commendation. The underlying issue wasn't solely Tiffany's actions. It was the fact that others allowed her behavior to continue. Her advancement within the department wasn't in spite of her conduct, it stemmed from it. However, vulnerabilities had been appearing for some time prior to the incident involving Judge Kelly. Previously dismissed grievances began to reappear discreetly. The Internal Affairs Division had undergone a change in leadership, and recently elected city council members showed less willingness to ignore problematic issues. Yet, Tiffany remained unchanged. In fact, her actions intensified. At a precinct barbecue, she dismissed the evolving situation as political maneuvering, declaring to her colleagues, "They can't touch me. I possess more damaging information about a significant portion of this department than they have about me." She was unaware of this fact. However, that wasn't a display of influence. It was a countdown, and it had already begun. But when she delivered that false accusation in court, targeting the incorrect individual in the most detrimental location, that countdown reached 0. Consequently, the entire system she had depended on started to falter. When Judge Antoine Kelly returned to his chambers, he didn't forcefully close the door. He didn't discard any objects. He didn't raise his voice. He simply took a seat. He inhaled, moved closer, and grasped the pile of case files on his desk as if it were a routine Tuesday. However, it was anything but. This was unprecedented for the numerous individuals present in that courtroom. It was unusual for the lawyers who had witnessed considerable stress. But it was especially shocking for everyone involved. Nobody had ever seen a uniformed officer strike a sitting judge. Kelly had served as a judge for 12 years, primarily in Franklin County. He preferred a modest demeanor. He avoided publicity. He favored simple ties. He kept photos of his wife and 3 sons on his bookshelf, alongside a miniature gavel his youngest made in woodshop. Those who knew him understood one thing. His quiet presence carried weight. He had grown up in St. Peters, Missouri. He was the first in his family to go to college, then law school. He worked in public defense for 7 years before switching sides. He'd seen every kind of case, the petty, the tragic, the senseless. He treated them all with the same steady focus. The scene in that courtroom was jarring. That slap? It was a familiar feeling for him. Disrespect had been a constant companion throughout his career. However, this was unlike anything he's experienced, not a subtle insult, but a physical act performed publicly and undeniably. Remarkably, he didn't react with anger or boasting. Kelly avoided theatrics. He prioritized accountability. In the hallway, his clerk, Monique Barnes, remained motionless, still clutching the folder she was intending to present prior to the incident. She entered his office cautiously. "Are you all right?" she inquired. He looked up, appearing composed. "I'm fine." She took a seat, her gaze carefully observing his face for any indication of anger. "I don't know what she thought she was doing," Monique stated. "We can file something. Press charges. The footage is already widespread." He nodded. "We could, but I want to observe how they manage it." She inclined her head. "You mean the department?" he asked, folding his hands. "The entire system." He continued. "Let's see if it's still averse to accountability." Monique noticed his approach. She understood his method. He wouldn't be aggressive. He would wait and allow them to reveal their intentions. By lunchtime, Judge Kelly's name was widely discussed online. People recalled him from a graduation speech delivered at a local high school 2 years prior. Video segments reappeared. Notable statements were shared. The law isn't a weapon. It's a tool, and it belongs to everyone, not just the loudest voices. However, he remained silent. He did not post on social media or issue a formal declaration. Responding to inquiries from reporters at the close of the day regarding potential charges, he offered this statement. "I anticipate the same level of professionalism and accountability that I have demonstrated to others over the past 12 years. I am confident that the system will address this appropriately." The situation presented a challenge, concealed by a demeanor of composure, and this was perceived by those around him. Concurrently, within the department, the atmosphere was becoming strained. The chief's assistant had left 3 messages on Tiffany's voicemail. A discreet inquiry was sent to HR by legal counsel representing the county. Simultaneously, at least 2 junior officers had reported being ill, seemingly to avoid involvement in the escalating situation. However, Kelly refrained from pressing the matter, as it was unnecessary. The recorded footage conveyed a more compelling narrative. Later that evening, at their residence, his wife, Nadine, sat beside him on the couch, holding his hand. "You should have permitted them to remove her in handcuffs," she stated softly. "I desire to do so," he confessed, "but I did not." She sighed, recognizing it wouldn't resolve the situation. "You think this time will be different?" He glanced at their joined hands. "I believe this time she chose the wrong man in the wrong place at the precise right moment." But if Tiffany thought the silence indicated defeat, she was about to discover just how resounding dignity could become when the nation was finally observing. By the following morning, Tiffany Rourke was placed on administrative leave. The official email from the department provided little detail. An investigation is underway concerning an incident involving court personnel. However, the details did not require a formal announcement. They were widely disseminated. The event rapidly spread online, with news broadcasts repeatedly showing it. Podcasts offered detailed analyses, and online forums were filled with accounts from individuals claiming prior negative experiences with her. A video surfaced from 4 years prior, depicting Tiffany arguing with a teenage boy during a traffic stop. The footage, grainy and captured by dashcam, showed her words slurred slightly and her tone menacing. The boy had been released without charges. However, the recording remained unseen until now. This time, people weren't just speaking, they were paying attention. And her badge offered no protection. Within the department, disarray reigned. Officers murmured in hallways. Her closest allies, those who previously joked with her at Friday briefings, now abruptly had other commitments when she approached. A memo from Internal Affairs began circulating. "We are seeking interviews with individuals who work directly under or alongside Officer Rourke." More than a dozen officers responded within 24 hours. Some did not provide their names. One of these officers, Detective Naomi Brennan, stated that she had waited almost 6 years to share her information. According to Naomi, she had previously threatened to reassign me to the county jail rotation if I questioned her reports again. A patrol officer, previously a cadet, recounted an instance where Tiffany placed a flashlight beneath a suspect's seat to create a pretext for a search. She referred to this as insurance, claiming no one would review her recorded footage. The situation had escalated beyond the initial incident. What began as a single event became a catalyst. Subsequently, a series of previously concealed issues were exposed. The Internal Affairs Department initiated a review of her prior reports, conducting comparisons. Analysis revealed certain trends, an imbalance in stops, and uncertain reasons given for those stops. The complaints persisted. Meanwhile, Tiffany attempted to shape the story. She contacted a local conservative talk show host, providing a hesitant phone interview, alleging the judge had appeared threatening and made a sudden action. The interview failed to gain traction. Even her consistent supporters hesitated. The sound of public relations defenses weakening became palpable when the host abruptly ended the segment, stating they would await further information before drawing conclusions. Subsequently, an email arrived from her union lawyer. A conflict of interest prevents me from continuing to represent you in this situation. Essentially, you're facing significant public scrutiny. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Journalists contacted her. Friends ceased responding. Even her daughter, 19-year-old Avery, a college freshman, sent a brief text. "Why would you do that, Mom?" Tiffany was seated in her kitchen. The once esteemed medals from her service were positioned above the refrigerator. They appeared altered now, more burdensome, as though they no longer belonged to her. She continued to feel she hadn't erred significantly. Not truly. He appeared like a perpetrator, she murmured, by herself at her kitchen table. He shouldn't have been present there, attired as he was, speaking as if he controlled the situation. Yet, she was aware. This wasn't about what Judge Kelly wore or his location. It was about her instinct, the one she never scrutinized, the one that had secured her advancements, esteem, and apprehension, but never responsibility. And now, that instinct had transformed into a destructive force. 2 days following the incident, the Franklin County Police Department conducted a press conference. Marking the first time in 15 years, the chief was accompanied by legal counsel. "We do not endorse Officer Rourke's behavior in the courtroom. An internal investigation is underway. We are treating this matter with utmost seriousness." He offered no praise, such as describing her as a good cop or noting distinguished service. He provided no words of support, just facts, objective and detached. Tiffany observed the press conference on her living room television, mirroring the actions of everyone else. However, if she believed the lack of communication from her colleagues was the most challenging aspect, she was soon to discover the consequences of the foundation she relied upon gradually disintegrating, piece by piece. Tiffany previously moved through the department with an air of ownership. That was no longer the case. Those few who still met her gaze did so fleetingly and anxiously, as if they wished to avoid association with her. The precinct felt different now. Her firm authority had vanished, leaving an unsettling emptiness. It was as if a flawed painting had been removed, yet the fastener remained embedded in the wall. The period of administrative leave stretched on, devoid of salary, identification, and explanation, only a prolonged wait. At her residence, her sphere of influence diminished rapidly. Her daughter, Avery, had ceased responding to messages, not since the night of the incident. They had not shared a particularly close bond. Tiffany had guided her upbringing with structure rather than affection. Now, the silence felt different. She attempted to call again. "This is your mom. Please, just talk to me." The line disconnected after the initial ring. Tiffany looked at her phone for a significant time before setting it face down. She had believed for so long that she was in charge, that people's fear indicated respect, that those internal criticisms were merely background noise from individuals who didn't comprehend the demands of the position. Now, she sat at her kitchen table, the blinds partially drawn to obscure the camera van parked across the street. Her time was abundant, and the silence was profound. She had not yet been charged. However, the department was no longer offering her protection. The union had ceased communication. The lawyers had stopped responding. Simultaneously, further allegations surfaced. A civil rights watchdog group submitted a petition demanding an independent review of each case she had handled during the previous 5 years. Individuals began to come forward, one after another. Individuals previously considered suspects. Former officers, even a retired judge who remembered Tiffany yelling at a defendant during a trial. He had dismissed it then as stress. She checked online to read the comments, simply out of curiosity. Roark exemplifies the need for reform. This woman believed she was above the law. She antagonized the wrong judge. Fortunately, and then the most damaging remarks. From people who asserted they were her friends. I consistently felt uneasy about her. Her behavior was consistently overly assertive. I recall an instance where she laughed following a child's tears in an interrogation room. That moment remains vivid. It wasn't disloyalty, it felt like obliteration, as if she had no connection to them whatsoever. Her voicemail was overflowing with messages, reporters, civil attorneys, and even a woman from a documentary company inquiring whether Tiffany would consider sharing her perspective. She did not respond to the call. The garage offered her a semblance of security. She would sit in the car, engine off, doors locked. She would spend hours inside, mechanically performing tasks, revisiting past cases in her thoughts, repeatedly telling herself that none of this would have occurred if that judge had recused himself, if he hadn't been attempting to create a disruption. However, regardless of how many ways she analyzed the situation, she couldn't alter the fact that she had slapped a man in open court, a man who presented no danger, who was not a suspect, who held the position of a sitting judge, and the entire country witnessed it. During one afternoon, her neighbor, Mrs. Beasley, who previously waved at her during morning jogs, passed by with her dog and did not even acknowledge Tiffany. That small instance affected her more than anticipated. The subtle dismissal, the courteous rejection, it felt more impactful than the news reports. Because news reports disappear, but being overlooked, that remains. She magnified her image. Sunglasses, a smirk, her hand rested on her hip. At the time, she believed she projected power. Now, she perceived only arrogance. However, just as she felt her decline had reached its lowest point, a letter arrived. It requested her presence at a public hearing, an event that would expose everything and compel her to confront the one man who never increased his volume, but had already undermined her legacy. A public hearing was planned for a Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. inside the Franklin County Municipal Assembly Hall. The venue itself indicated that this would not be a routine, closed-door assessment. It was intended to be observed. When Tiffany arrived, dressed in a simple black suit, without any identification or weapons, the room was already mostly filled. Journalists occupied the rear wall, their audio equipment attached to their belts. The folding chairs creaked as residents, activists, and legal observers filled them. Behind a line of junior prosecutors, in the second row, sat Judge Antoine Kelly. He wore a dark gray suit instead of a robe, with a legal pad resting on his knee. His eyes were calm, and he appeared to be someone who had come to work, present to observe, not to punish. Tiffany's lawyer, recently appointed, and a young public defender who had accepted her case with some hesitation, stood next to her, offering instructions she barely registered. Facing them, the Civilian Review Board was arranged in a semicircle of plastic nameplates and serious faces. Present were a retired detective, a former public defender, a local pastor, a community organizer, and a judge from another county. Although it wasn't a courtroom, it felt much like one. Chairwoman Ms. Loretta Vaughn initiated the session precisely. Her voice possessed a sharp clarity that commanded attention. This hearing is not a trial. It is a public review of Officer Tiffany Roark's conduct, encompassing both recent events and her past record, and assessing its relevance to her continued ability to serve in law enforcement. Tiffany Roark visibly reacted to the phrase, "continue serving," as if suggesting that possibility remained. It felt, to her, as though this wasn't the conclusion of her career. The proceedings commenced with the courtroom video, displayed on a modest monitor that inadequately conveyed the gravity of the situation, yet allowed for no dispute. The audio reverberated softly within the hall. The sound of the strike, the ensuing quiet, Judge Kelly's composed voice. Following this, testimony was presented. Officer Naomi Brennan delivered her written account concerning the threat Tiffany issued 6 years ago. Her tone remained even but detached. Subsequently, two individuals previously arrested testified, both noting that Tiffany's name appeared in their official records, even though they were not present during the incidents. She reportedly authorized their arrests without providing any clarification. A succession of witnesses offered similar accounts, while Tiffany remained still, her gaze fixed forward, exhibiting no visible response. Towards the conclusion of the proceedings, the chairwoman requested Judge Kelly to approach the microphone. He arrived without legal documents or written notes, simply standing with his jacket fastened and then speaking. I will not take this board's time reiterating what everyone witnessed. That information is already part of the public record. He began. What I want to focus on is what follows accountability, because that's where the essential work commences. He paused. A few pens scratched against paper. I have served this county for over a decade. I have observed people commit reckless actions out of fear. I have seen people lash out because they felt insignificant. But what transpired that day in my courtroom was neither fear nor a mistake. It was an instinctive reaction developed over years of unrestricted authority. He shifted subtly, just enough to connect with Tiffany's gaze. I'm not present to destroy anyone's life. I'm here to bring this community to remember what justice should embody and what it must not resemble evermore. Then he took his seat. There was no applause, no acknowledgements, only silence. Tiffany's legal representative offered some concluding remarks, largely formal, primarily requesting compassion. It was inconsequential. The board observed a short break prior to releasing their recommendation. Officer Tiffany Rourke was scheduled for permanent removal from duty. All benefits were to be revoked, and her conduct would be referred to the state attorney for further review. She remained still, appearing detached, as the room cleared. The way people regarded her had changed, not with fear or even animosity, but with a lack of interest. That absence of concern felt particularly painful. Judge Kelly passed her as he left. He did not pause. He did not glance back. Because some individuals do not require revenge, the truth was sufficient. Long after the cameras stopped flashing, the question lingered. What lesson would the community retain from the quiet that ultimately compelled the system to respond? Weeks elapsed. The headlines diminished. Other controversies gained prominence. Yet, in Franklin County, a change occurred. Genuinely this time. Not merely in hushed conversations. Not in secret meetings. But in the way people viewed the system. In the way they viewed one another. The courtroom where it happened remained active. Cases proceeded as they always did. However, a palpable shift occurred when Judge Antoine Kelly entered the room. Everyone rose with a distinct air of reverence, not solely due to his position, but because of how he conducted himself. He never sought recognition or accolades. He consistently performed his duties. On one afternoon, following a juvenile hearing, a young public defender approached him in the hallway. "Can I ask you something, Judge?" She inquired, looking around. She then asked, "That day, how did you stay calm?" He paused for a moment. I preferred not to give her what she anticipated. Then he smiled gently. He nodded once, and he walked on. That response lingered with her, and it resonated through the courthouse in other ways. Officers began participating in revised bias training that held genuine significance. A community board was granted substantive authority, more than just a nameplate and a folding table. Certain old case files were examined. Not every single one, but a selection, sufficient to signal that the doors were beginning to open. Regarding Tiffany Rourke, she reseated. She divested her home discreetly and relocated to a new area spanning 3 counties. There were no interviews granted, nor any public announcements made. She secured employment in private security for a shipping company. Her name ceased to be prominently featured in news reports, appearing only occasionally as a minor reference in opinion pieces. There was no return to public life, no narrative of recovery. Her decline wasn't sudden, it was gradual. Yet, what she forfeited was the sole thing of consequence to her: authority. And in its place, a silence settled that she couldn't alter. Simultaneously, more individuals stepped forward. Individuals harmed by fellow officers. Significant events, all fueled by what they witnessed in the courtroom. They sought not retribution, but recognition. That was the impact. The incident when Tiffany struck Judge Kelly was pivotal. It represented the culmination of a previously concealed history, a truth that resonated with the public. In a community like Franklin County, where progress typically unfolded gradually and discreetly, such visibility had a profound effect, extending far beyond the police department. The event disrupted the routines of an entire community. During a town hall meeting held 2 months afterward, a woman addressed the group. She appeared older, with her glasses slipping down her nose, and spoke with a steady voice. "I don't want another apology," she stated. "I want policies. I want change that doesn't wait for the next viral video." The room acknowledged her sentiment, understanding precisely what she meant. They understood because they had witnessed the repercussions when someone believes their badge provides immunity from accountability. Reality entered the room, presenting itself with the authority of a judge. This wasn't a fabricated narrative. There were no 11th-hour collapses, no sensational admissions. Instead, it was the gradual decline of an individual from a position of high regard, and the subsequent, equally deliberate effort to construct something more substantial in its place. The confines of that courtroom would forever remember the events that transpired within them. The initial impact might diminish. The media attention may dissipate, but the underlying principle endured. Unfettered power can become destructive. A lack of expression can carry more weight than vocal protest. And genuine justice doesn't require a forceful declaration to be acknowledged. What lessons can we draw from these observations? Perhaps it's that a person's true nature invariably emerges when no one appears to be observing, when a feeling of invulnerability takes hold, or when a facade falls away in a moment that cannot be retrieved. Tiffany established a dominion based on intimidation. Judge Kelly cultivated his standing through composure. Only one of them presently holds a position in the setting, ultimately, that embodies justice. Should this account prompt reflection, evoke emotion, or simply inspire a moment of consideration, please subscribe to the channel. We share narratives that others hesitate to explore, with truth as our guiding principle. The CEO, known for his quiet demeanor, entered his own dealership incognito. What he overheard a salesman say to a struggling single mother abruptly halted him and initiated an unforeseen sequence of events. Derek Belton appeared unremarkable, certainly not the person who authorized salaries for 137 employees. He wasn't wearing a blazer, didn't carry a briefcase, and he arrived without a driver. That morning, he wore faded Levi's, well-worn sneakers, and a Tennessee Titans cap shading his face. He would be unrecognizable, even to the regional manager he had dined with 2 Fridays prior. He parked his black 2011 Honda Accord a short distance away. It wasn't a necessity. He possessed the means for a garage full of luxury vehicles. However, today was not about displays of wealth. He walked the additional block quietly, noticing the texture of the pavement with each footfall. As the dealership appeared, the signage, crisp and prominent, displaying Belton Auto Group across the glass, caused him to hesitate. His name. But what was happening beneath the surface? The concerns had initially surfaced as quiet remarks. A customer in Murfreesboro reported being sold an extended warranty she didn't comprehend. A family in Franklin alleged their monthly payment differed from the agreed-upon amount. These were minor issues. However, they caused Derek to question things. This location in Charlotte, Tennessee had consistently been a high-volume dealership. It specialized in mid-range vehicles and enjoyed strong sales. People trusted this dealership, or they once did. The showroom doors opened as he entered. The air held the scent of coffee and Armor All. A bell chimed above him, yet no one acknowledged it. Derek surveyed the area. There were 3 sales desks and 2 salesmen engaged in conversation by the corner water cooler. A woman managed the reception desk, absorbed in her phone. He appeared unremarkable, and that was his intention. He began his assessment in the service bay. It was quiet, the technicians working diligently, focused on their tasks. He observed nothing unusual. He proceeded through the customer waiting area, observing a man browse a magazine as his daughter entertained herself on a damaged iPad. He received no assistance. There was no greeting, not even a simple acknowledgement. He approached the line of Camrys situated near the glass wall. A couple stood close by, engaged in a conversation with a salesman whose speech was rapid and overly enthusiastic. The older man appeared displeased. The woman seemed bothered. "Sir," the salesman stated, "you won't locate a more advantageous offer anywhere. This item is covered by warranty and has seen minimal use. However, I can offer this price only if we finalize the agreement today." "That's the current situation," Derek mentioned. He recognized this as a tactic he hadn't been taught and made a note to himself. He then proceeded around a corner close to the used inventory office and paused. A young woman, likely in her late 20s, wearing a light jacket and carrying a baby in a carrier, was speaking with a man in a navy blazer. She appeared anxious, repeatedly looking down at a well-worn envelope she held. It likely contained pay stubs or a bank statement. The salesman presented himself with an assured, perhaps overly confident, demeanor, speaking with charm and certainty. "You're receiving full coverage for the first 3 years?" the salesman stated. "Bumper to bumper plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even the air conditioning, it's covered." That was inaccurate. And the $895 fee I referenced, that's standard practice. We apply that to all our transactions. It covers a comprehensive pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching. Derek paused. VIN etching? That practice had been removed from the dealership's process 3 years prior. And warranty coverage? No, that wasn't consistent with the terms. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure greater honesty and transparency. His pulse decelerated. He retreated a step back, out of their line of sight, heart pounding, but not from anger. It was disappointment. This was his business. This was his name. And this man was deceiving, with ease, a woman who appeared to have saved every cent to be present. Derek wasn't prepared to show himself. Not yet. He needed to observe the situation's extent. Derek moved discreetly behind a row of brochures close to the finance office, watching unseen. The woman nodded slowly in response to the salesman's words. Her fingers closed more firmly around the envelope. The baby in the carrier shifted and emitted a quiet whimper, but she seemed largely unaware. She was attempting to remain calm, likely assessing how closely the figures aligned with her budget. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry," he said. "People get nervous about credit checks, but I know how to navigate the process. I'll get you into a vehicle today, even if we have to be resourceful." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the exit. But the salesman kept his tone steady, reassuring. Too smooth, too confident, Derek clenched his jaw, then turned away. He didn't want her to feel observed. He walked towards the far end of the showroom, where a teenage boy was standing near a pre-owned SUV. A salesman passed him twice, without a greeting or any offer of assistance. He simply walked by. Derek moved next to the boy. "You're considering this one?" he asked. The teen looked over, seemingly a little taken aback. "Yeah, possibly. My aunt is outside. She asked me to check it out while she parks." Derek nodded. "Do you know what kind of engine it has?" The kid shrugged. "Not really. She simply requires a secure environment. Her vehicle malfunctioned last week, another incident. Another customer was missed. It was hurtful, not due to the lost transaction, but because it confirmed everything for Derek. At some point, they had ceased to listen, stopped acknowledging individuals. And it wasn't just a single problematic employee. It was a prevailing attitude, a recurring behavior. He proceeded towards the reception desk. The woman still hadn't looked up. She tapped her screen, chewing her gum, scrolling. Derek positioned himself in front of her, simply to gauge the situation. 10 seconds elapsed. Then 20. At last, she raised her head and blinked. "Oh, do you have an appointment?" "No," Derek replied calmly. "Just browsing." She responded with a languid smile, gesturing vaguely towards the floor. "They'll get to you." They did not. For the subsequent 30 minutes, Derek moved between various departments. The only assistance he received came from a young lot attendant named Trevor, who appeared to be no older than 19. He noticed Derek close to the service entrance and offered, "Sir, do you need anything? We have water inside. I can get you a brochure if you're interested in the new hybrids." Derek smiled and replied, "I'm good. Thank you." He then asked, "What's your name?" Trevor responded, "Trevor." "Do you like it here, Trevor?" Trevor paused. "It's all right. People can be rude. Not just customers, but sometimes managers too. I prefer to keep to myself." "Do they treat customers fairly?" Trevor looked down. Most of the time. There was no bitterness in his tone. Derek placed a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. "Be careful who teaches you what," he advised. Trevor looked at him, then nodded. Before Derek could say anything further, a familiar laugh came from the glass hallway. Brent Collar, the salesman, was now leading the young mother toward a side office. Her name tag said Brent Collar. She appeared overwhelmed, holding her papers tightly. Derek kept a discreet distance as he watched. Brent paused before the office door, retrieved paperwork from a file, and announced, "Here's the first quote. It's going to appear high initially, but please don't worry. I'll adjust it once I input your information into the system. This is our standard procedure." Derek moved nearer, feigning interest in a flyer on the wall. From his position, he observed the quote. The figures were inflated. Listed were charges for warranty, dealership fees, VIN etching, and a maintenance guarantee, all non-standard and unapproved. This was everything Derek had worked to eliminate years prior. Brent, however, did not appear to be a person apprehensive about disregarding regulations. He presented as someone who believed no one was observing. Brent indicated for the woman to take a seat. She settled into the chair, moving her baby's carrier to the floor nearby. The little girl made a soft whimpering sound and kicked gently, yet Brent did not even look down. His gaze remained focused on the documents he held, turning pages, emphasizing sections, and drawing circles. Each action appeared rehearsed, refined, and routine. "We're going to structure this to ensure your monthly payment stays under $350, he stated. The woman offered a slow, cautious nod. "What's your name again?" he inquired, barely looking up. "Monique," she replied. "Monique Ellis." Derek stood just outside the office, back against the wall, feigning interest in the certified pre-owned display. He overheard every word. Brent smiled. "All right, Monique. You're going to love this. You're approved for a 2019 Corolla. Excellent condition, low mileage. That's a significant advantage. We remain committed to your protection. Therefore, we're providing a 3-year full coverage plan. This includes everything from the engine to the electronics. Roadside assistance is also included should you lock your keys in the car. That level of peace of mind? Priceless." Derek's hand slowly curled into a fist by his side. However, there was no such plan, not like Brent described it. And the quote, the one he'd caught a glimpse of earlier, had extra charges tucked in every margin. Some of them were outright fiction. Monique adjusted in her chair. "So, is all of that included in the price?" Brent offered a warm, reassuring smile. "It's all part of your protection package. We simply itemize it separately on the form. This simplifies things for the finance office." He continued, speaking rapidly and with excessive confidence, gesturing with a pen as if performing a magic trick. He even produced a calculator to minimize the appearance of the payment amount. For example, without the package, your monthly cost would be $384. With the included safeguard, the price reduces to $349. More manageable, isn't it? Derek scrutinized the figures. That calculation appeared illogical. It seemed like a deceptive tactic. He couldn't fathom how Brent maintained his composure. But it was evident this wasn't his first presentation. Then Monique posed a question that silenced the room. Do you believe I could return tomorrow?" she inquired softly. "I simply want to ensure I fully grasp everything first." Brent's demeanor subtly altered, a nearly imperceptible change. His jaw tightened briefly. However, he quickly regained his composure, adopting a more affable tone. "I completely understand," he said smoothly. "But the situation is that this car has 2 other potential buyers. One of them test drove it earlier today. I can't guarantee it will still be available tomorrow. You wouldn't want to miss out because of a minor consideration, would you?" Monique blinked. Her fingers shifted around her envelope. Brent quietly lowered his voice, leaning closer. "Listen, I've witnessed individuals leave, intending to consider it further overnight. Then the car was gone, and they were facing a situation that was more difficult and costly. You deserve something better, and this is it. He pushed the documents across to her. That was the end of it. Derek entered the office, maintaining a calm but resolute tone. That doesn't sound like the protection plan we provide, Brent said, blinking. Monique turned to Derek, appearing surprised. Brent quickly regained his composure. Pardon me? Derek repeated, the plan you're describing doesn't exist, not in that form. Brent lifted an eyebrow, assessing Derek. Do you work here? Something like that. Brent chuckled dryly. Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been here for 4 years. I know the packages inside and out. Derek pointed to the quote. Show me where it says full electronics coverage. Show me where VAR and etching is required. Show me the breakdown. Brent hesitated. It's in the system. Finance will explain it better. No, Derek said flatly. You explain it right now. Monique rose slowly in front of her, holding her baby close. Brent's face flushed. I don't have to deal with this. You're not even, but he stopped speaking. The general manager had just appeared behind Derek, his eyes wide. Mr. Belton, the manager said. Brent's mouth dropped open. Derek didn't smile, didn't say a word. He turned toward Monique. I'm sorry, he said softly. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. But this wasn't over, not yet. The repercussions extended beyond a single falsehood. The room seemed to contract the instant the name, Mebleton, was spoken. Brent's complexion turned ashen. His assured demeanor disappeared, as if it were vapor on a chilled surface. Monique looked back and forth between the two men, bewildered, still cradling her baby, uncertain of the situation she's entered. Derek subtly turned to the general manager, standing in the doorway. He requested a conference room, speaking softly. Jeff Lorman, the manager, a man with a flushed face, nodded and indicated a hallway located at the rear of the showroom. Derek turned to Monique and spoke in a quiet, reassuring voice. Please come with me. I want to correct this. She paused briefly, then followed. Her movements were deliberate but hesitant. The baby began to stir again, perhaps reacting to the palpable tension. As they passed the workstations, the entire level appeared to become silent. Telephones ceased their ringing, and conversations were interrupted. Several employees glanced over their workstations and angled towards one another, speaking quietly. Trevor, the lot attendant from earlier, positioned himself close to the entrance and offered Derek a knowing look, but remained silent. Within the compact, glass-enclosed conference room, Derek drew out a chair for Monique and settled opposite her. Jeff entered behind them, appearing noticeably uneasy. Brent followed, attempting to seem unconcerned, but without success. He folded his arms and rested against the distant wall. Derek took the folder Brent had put on the table. Is this the quote you gave her? He asked, not looking up. Brent moved slightly. Yes. Derek opened the folder, laid out the pages, and circled several numbers with a pen from the table's holder. Explain these, he said. Brent sat up straighter. Look, I don't know why I'm being questioned. Explain them, Brent paused. He looked at Jeff, hoping for support, but Jeff avoided his gaze. I mean, those are standard charges. Everyone includes them. Do you have documentation showing these fees were authorized? Derek inquired. They should be in the system. No, they aren't, Derek replied, his voice gaining strength. I was involved in revising the system. That VIN etching fee? It was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage? It's limited to 5 years, not the comprehensive coverage you advertised. You added more than $2,000 in fabricated fees to a customer who came here simply trying to purchase a secure vehicle for her baby. Monique's hands trembled a little as she listened, but she did not speak. Her gaze remained on the document. You stated the payment would be $349, Derek proceeded. That is achievable only if she provides a down payment you failed to disclose. Furthermore, the interest rate you presented to her is inflated by a minimum of 2.5%. You are not just misleading Brent, you are being dishonest. Brent moved away from the wall and straightened. I have consistently met my quarterly goals. Customers leave satisfied. I understand sales, all right? Derek moved closer. You know how to apply undue influence. A distinction exists. Jeff finally spoke. Derek, I didn't know he was doing all that, I swear. We've been busy and the numbers have been good. That's exactly the problem, Derek interjected. You cared about the numbers, I cared about the people. Monique rose then, slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I thought this was a good place, she said quietly. I really thought this was different. Derek turned to her. It was supposed to be, and I'm sorry it wasn't. He reached into his back pocket, retrieved his wallet, and produced a card. This is my direct line. I will personally ensure you receive a fair deal. If you desire the car, you'll obtain it at the correct price, free of unnecessary complications. She accepted the card deliberately. Thank you, she said. We'll have someone else manage the paperwork, Derek added. Someone who doesn't fabricate figures. Brent's arms fell to his sides. Clean out your desk, Derek stated, rising. You are terminated here. There was no room for discussion. You were aware of that, yet disregarded it. Brent didn't object further. He left abruptly, speaking quietly to himself. No one pursued him. Derek addressed Jeff. We aren't finished talking either. He stated, I'll see you in your office in 10. Subsequently, he held the door for Monique and guided her back towards the lobby. People glanced around. Conversations began anew, subdued and apprehensive. Derek remained silent until they arrived at the reception desk. He regarded the woman seated there. Did you greet her upon her arrival? The receptionist hesitated, then swallowed. I don't recall. Derek slowly shook his head. Begin to recall, or begin searching. However, dismissing a single employee wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. Derek recognized that a cultural shift was necessary, or the company would decline from within. Derek was seated alone in Jeff Lorman's office, gazing out at the dealership floor through the blinds. A heavy silence filled the room. From behind the closed door, the usual showroom sounds had resumed. The usual sounds filled the office, casual chatter, the click of footsteps on tile, and ringing phones. However, a new feeling now permeated the atmosphere, a sense of unease. He glanced up as Jeff entered, his movements uncertain. The man appeared diminished, as if suddenly aware of his oversight. Jeff took a seat without prompting. I was unaware, he said softly. I truly swear to you, Derek, I wasn't aware Brent was engaging in that activity. But you were aware of something, Derek responded. You knew complaints were increasing. You were aware that deals were becoming more competitive. You were also aware that customer satisfaction scores decreased last quarter, and you attributed it to the surveys used. Jeff remained silent. Derek moved forward, resting his elbows on the desk. What happened to what we created here? He asked. I thought we were performing well, Jeff stated. The numbers were strong. Staff turnover was minimal. I assumed perhaps the industry simply shifted slightly. The industry didn't shift, Derek responded, maintaining a calm tone. We did. We lost sight of why people initially came here. We ceased prioritizing customer relationships and began focusing on achieving sales targets. Jeff sighed, massaging his face. So what's the plan? We need a thorough overhaul, Derek stated. And that extends beyond dismissing Brent. I require a review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Reimburse any clients where the terms weren't transparently conveyed. Furthermore, I want individual meetings with each salesperson. I need to understand their training processes, the priorities they receive, and to identify anyone else who believes it's acceptable to deceive customers with a friendly demeanor. Jeff acknowledged slowly. And one more thing, Derek added, I want Trevor in my office next week. Jeff blinked. The lot kid? Derek replied, yeah, he's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters. A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist appeared, visibly nervous. Mr. Belton, the customer, Monique Ellis, is still in the lounge, she said. She said she's waiting for her ride. Derek stood. Please get her a bottle of water and offer her a seat in the private lounge, away from the plastic chairs near the vending machine. Make sure she feels valued. The receptionist acknowledged promptly and went to attend to the request. Derek returned to the showroom. Several employees glanced up, but there was no conversation. Some consciously avoided eye contact. Monique was situated in the far corner, her baby now asleep in the carrier beside her. She appeared weary, not only physically, but also emotionally drained. He approached her gently. "This is a lot," he admitted. "More than you anticipated," she replied with a gentle smile. "I've faced tougher situations," he stated. "I understand that, but you shouldn't have had to experience this," she said, shrugging. "People deceive me frequently. It happens at work, in shops, and even at the clinic. I'm accustomed to it." That comment resonated more deeply than he anticipated. "You shouldn't be exposed to that. Certainly not here. That's my responsibility." She then focused on him, truly observing him. "Why did you come in today? Why are you dressed like that?" Derek offered a soft smile. She stifled a quiet chuckle, noting people rarely shared the full truth with the man in the suit. He then presented her with a small folder. "If you're still interested in that car, these are the accurate figures. There are no hidden details. I had our finance manager verify them directly. Furthermore, we've included a year of service maintenance at no cost." Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Why?" He replied, "Because someone needs to remind this place of its values." Shortly after, a silver hatchback, distinguished by a missing hubcap, arrived to take her away. Her sister signaled from the driver's seat. Monique rose, corrected the carrier, and glanced back at Derek. "Don't let them ruin what you built," she said. "I won't," he replied. She exited without a backward look. But restoring Monique's confidence was not the only task. It involved rebuilding the confidence of every person who had ever entered those doors. Derek returned 3 days later. This time, there was no disguise, no cap, no jeans. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and entered through the front doors as if he belonged. And in truth, he did. This wasn't intended as a display of dominance. It was a matter of responsibility. The entire staff had received notification that morning. Scheduled meetings were canceled, and phone lines were redirected to voicemail. The dealership remained open, but no sales transactions would occur prior to 11 a.m. Derek had arranged a company-wide meeting, and every employee attended, including those on part-time shifts. The group assembled in the break room, squeezed together amongst vending machines and aged chairs. Several were leaning against the walls. Trevor stood toward the rear, his arms crossed, but attentive. Jeff was seated near the front, a notebook open but unused. Derek addressed them, speaking plainly without a microphone or podium. "I established this company in 2004, he began, "not through investors or a franchise agreement, but with a used car lot situated behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. During the first week, I sold 3 cars, personally washing each one. Some individuals quietly expressed amusement. At that time, I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but I possessed 2 valuable assets: my reputation and my commitment to honesty. I consistently ensured I could fulfill any promise made and avoided dishonesty when closing deals." The atmosphere in the room was now quiet. "However, a significant shift has occurred," he continued. "This isn't limited to a single salesperson. It's about how we compromise on minor details and prioritize speed over customer care. We've begun to see individuals as sales goals rather than human beings. That's not what I built. That's not who we are." He looked around the room. "If you've ever included an additional charge because you believed you could, if you've ever hurried a woman out the door because she didn't appear to be able to afford our services, if you've ever spoken condescendingly to someone simply because you were able, today marks a turning point." A few people visibly expressed discomfort. "You have a choice," he said. The situation demanded a resolution, either assistance or a new employment opportunity. Silence followed, then a voice spoke up. It was Trevor, Mr. Belton, and Derek turned to him. "Yeah," Trevor said, appearing nervous, but proceeding anyway. "What if some of us were performing well, but no one acknowledged it?" Derek smiled. "Then we need to start noticing. Starting today," he walked over and handed Trevor a small envelope. Inside was a letter of promotion, from lot attendant to junior sales associate, including full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. "Are you serious?" Derek stated, "Because the people who treat others with respect are the ones I want representing my name." Following the meeting, changes occurred rapidly. Brent's deals were reviewed. 5 of them necessitated full or partial refunds. Monique's case served as the focus of a training seminar. Every single manager was obligated to participate in a 3-week ethics and customer care workshop. Derek even re-engaged a retired employee. Arlene Cupp, a direct woman in her 60s who previously managed the front desk, had departed 2 years prior, citing a change in the atmosphere. She was now the new head of customer relations. Arlene's initial action involved installing a glass wall separating the sales desk and the finance office, ensuring transparency in all communications. Derek walked through the lot that Friday, observing the staff's interactions. A subtle shift permeated the atmosphere, not flawless, but calmer, more deliberate, stemming from understanding rather than apprehension. He observed a young salesperson patiently explaining trim-level differences to an older gentleman, ensuring he was heard. This detail, absent from any spreadsheet, held greater significance than any monthly performance goal. Arlene approached. "It appears they recall their employer," she remarked, and rightfully so. Derek responded, stating he wasn't leaving, although one element remained. The core reason for this endeavor needed to be revisited. That Sunday morning, Derek was seated on the porch of his mother's former residence in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just begun to rise, and the air retained the stillness of the early hours. He took his coffee slowly, looking out at the yard he previously mowed every Saturday during his teenage years. Years had passed since her passing, yet the atmosphere of the place remained unchanged. Now, it belonged to him, recollection solidified in brick and wood. He retrieved a photograph from his jacket pocket, the image faded with curled edges. The picture showed him, no older than 10, standing next to his mother before a dull, rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was broad and proud, not due to the car's newness as it wasn't, but because it was hers. That marked the day she purchased her first vehicle independently. He recalled how she, a nurse, managed without a cosigner or assistance, relying solely on her paycheck and a salesman who painstakingly explained each document before she signed. Derek remembered her meticulously verifying every detail. He remembered her asking questions, even when her voice wavered, and how the man behind the desk never made her feel inadequate for doing so. He remembered that. And now, decades later, he occupied the man's position behind the desk. He was the man whose name appeared above the showroom. He was the person who influenced every customer's experience upon entering. He looked at the picture once more. That instance profoundly impacted him, teaching him that dignity wasn't something acquired through wealth. It was something inherent, deserved simply by being present and making an effort. The world hadn't been kind to his mother, but on that day, she received recognition, and he carried that with him. Returning to the dealership the following week, Derek requested a new plaque be installed by the entrance. The message stated that we treat each customer as if they were purchasing their first car, demonstrating dignity, patience, and honesty. It wasn't intended for widespread attention or media coverage. The goal was for every employee to read it daily. Trevor read it every morning, first thing. Monique returned a month later to have her car serviced. She entered wearing a hoodie, holding her daughter, and smiled upon seeing Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled in return. "Of course I do. We had her in that silver Corolla, correct?" She affirmed. "She's performing well." They continued their conversation briefly, covering minor details, and the interaction felt comfortable, because now it felt natural. Derek observed from his office, unnoticed, simply watching. He didn't require attention. He desired none. The focus wasn't on him. The purpose was this: you don't establish a successful business solely on profit. You build it on trust, on the manner in which you treat people when you believe no one is observing. He learned that from his mom. He communicated this to others via Brent. And now, with each handshake, each sale, each explanation provided without pressure or misleading information, he was restoring it. Incrementally, deliberately. That's what integrity truly represents. Not something asserted, something safeguarded. For once lost, regaining it demands all your resources. And Derek Belton refused to allow his reputation to signify anything other than honesty. If this story resonated with you personally, if it brought to mind a time you felt disregarded, or a time someone championed you when they weren't obligated to, please subscribe. We have more stories coming that speak to the heart, not just the headline.